Call the October 3rd meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. The first order of business is public comment, but before we proceed to public comment, and I'd just like to take this opportunity and offer the members of the board the opportunity to congratulate the Clinton Police Department. As some of you may know, the Clinton Police Department was instrumental recently in effecting a major drug arrest around, and was stopping people shipping heroin and phenytoin between Providence, Rhode Island, and central Massachusetts. And that investigation began here in Clinton, and the town police force was instrumental in effecting its conclusion. So we'd like to tell them, job well done and congratulations. If there's no other comments about that, we'll move to public comment. Is there anyone here for public comment? Okay, ladies, if you would come up and introduce yourselves, say who you are and what your address is, and we'd be happy to hear from you.
Hi there. So I am Nicole Malone. I'm the market manager for the new year-round weekly farmers market set to kick off at 55 Sterling Street this Sunday. First, I want to say thank you for your time and for listening to what we have to share today. I think it's important to give a little background before I explain what we're doing. I'm a resident of Clinton for 29 years now. I just moved to Sterling this year, but I've gone through the Clinton school system. I was a Girl Scout in town. I worked an internship at the Item in high school, and I've actively been involved with community building efforts and the preservation of downtown Clinton since high school. I sat on the board of the Downtown Merchant Association in 2014 through 16. I organized art installations in empty storefronts. I'm co-founder of the community garden downtown, and I also started an artist collective and held a series of holiday markets as well as pop-up farmers markets in Central Park in 2016. I'm self-employed as a graphic designer, and I've worked with a number of businesses in Clinton, the Museum of Russian Icons, Polis Center for Social and Economic Development, and Coffee Lands, to name a few. This year I left my position as an organizer of a large-scale free public festival in the city of Worcester, which brought 12,000 people to the city for our one-day event, and I decided to focus on smaller community-based initiatives. I became a resident artist of 3 Match Creations at the same address as our farmers market with Heather here, and within a month the opportunity to expand into a larger space and manage the space so that we could use it to host local farms, budding businesses, and artists to come together and connect with our community once a week. In collaboration with Heather, founder of 3 Match, our goal with this project is the opportunity to cultivate a strong sense of community that is open to all our deeply rooted residents here, as well as the new families who have moved into town in recent years. Markets and collaborative spaces like this are filling underutilized mill spaces and cropping up in a number of cities like Lowell, Massachusetts, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, Dover, New Hampshire, and of course, Worcester. This process, however, is new to us, and we've been facing our fair share of obstacles, including miscommunication about ADA compliance and permitting, as well as the fact that our building suddenly went up for sale a mere week before our opening day, which we've been planning for months now, including paying a year's rent in full. We hope to go forward with our project, which has much bigger goals for our community, and I'll let Heather jump in and give a quick background on 3 Match Creations, the S-Corp that is enabling me to see this project through. We hope to garner support, shared resources, and any advice that our Board of Selectmen and our community members wish to share. We hope to see you at our first market date this Sunday. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Heather Cook, and this is my business manager, Latia Elaine, here on the front row. I'm not from here. I'm from very far from here. I grew up off-grid in northwest Montana, and my first day in a classroom was my first day in college, so I was uneducated, as you would say. But I was educated in many other things, and one of the most critical, I believe, was community, because we needed each other for survival. And we passed down traditions, and we passed on skills, and that's the kind of culture I grew up in. I've been working in humanitarian work for 16 years, and I specialize in troubled teens who cut themselves, who are suicidal. And I started looking at some of the issues that were happening with these teenagers that I was working with, And I found myself complaining a lot about the culture and society And I always tell my kids, don't complain about something that you don't have an answer for, or at least willing to try to find an answer for. So this is my attempt to have an answer for some of the things that I believe are really deteriorating the resources we're giving our kids and our culture and our society. We are not educating relationships anymore. Kids don't know how to look each other in the eye and have conversations. We're not sure even how to shake each other's hands anymore and say, hey, my name is. And I feel like that's part of some of the very deep-rooted issues when it comes to mental health, when it comes to having an issue and being able to go to somebody. We don't have the skills to communicate in the way we used to. And I have had some success with multi-generational connection by implementing creative education. And by that I mean somebody knows how to knit and they're an older person. They can teach a younger person how to knit. They not only pass on a skill, they pass on a relationship. So you find these kind of micro communities that are built out of production and creativity. So I founded Three Match Creations with the idea that I wanted to fight a few things: disconnection, lack of resources that we're passing on, and also to support the creative out-of-the-box thinker. Because it's very difficult sometimes to find the support you need if you're an out-of-the-box visionary who has something. The system doesn't support it. And so Three Match is basically, it's almost like an incubator. And I thought it was actually really creative and I was coming up with a new idea, but it's not. I'm not original. There's other people who are doing this. I just found out after the fact that I came up with my bright idea. So it's kind of an incubator for initiatives and for people who are trying to make change and educate society and to create relationships. And so that's where Three Match came from. You have a list up there, I believe, of some of our tentative classes. We have more than that. That's just a sampling of some of them. So these are kind of those micro communities I'm talking about, where people are passing on not only skills, but also relationships, and also enabling creativity in the arts in our town. I love this town. I've been here for 10 years. Well, I shouldn't say I've been here. I've been in Sterling, but I claim Clinton is home as much as Sterling, and I work in Lancaster, actually. I'm down there, so this is the Tri-City, right, the Tri-Town. Anyway, I love this place. I love my building, and this is unfortunate because, as you know, it has been put on the market, and we had some friendly marijuana growers going through there this morning, so that's a little discouraging because I know they have a lot of money, and they have a lot of ability, and I have a dream for that building. I have a dream for it to be a creative arts center, a creative community center for people to come and learn and to build initiatives like Matchstick Market out of. But I don't have $1.1 million, but I have a dream and I have a vision, and I have a plan for development in that building. So we are working on that, and we're going to fight, we're going to try, we're going to see what we can do, we're going to present what we have and see if we can't get some investors behind us and develop the building in general. I hope to do that before somebody else comes, but of course, coming here before you is an important part of that process, so you know what we're trying to do, and I hope that we can garner your support, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And so you are, on Sunday, October 7th, are having a matchstick market. This is sort of a local farmers market with artisan products, fresh produce, fresh cut flowers, herbs, locally made foods. It's that sort of, so that's what you're going to be doing on Sunday, and I assume?
Also with the collaborative, yes. So our studios will be open so people can come and see the concept of the workspace, as well as get a list of workshops that are available. We'll have activities and crafts there as well. So it's a co-opening, a co-grand opening.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and I
Thank
wish
you.
you every success.
Thank you very much.
Best of luck to you.
Thank you.
Best of luck. Sir, I believe you had something?
I did.
Thank you.
My name is Jeff Swan. I live at 132 Franklin Street in Clinton. Thank you for the time to speak. At the last Selectmen meeting, there was a review and discussion of the reworking of Walnut Street. In the course of that commentary and debate, there was mention of the trees that line the street. I took that to be the trees that occupied the space between the sidewalk and the curb. That space seems to have a variety of names, but verge seems to be the most universal, so I'll use that term going forward. Well, I cannot quote who said it. I'm fairly certain I heard a request to ensure that the trees in the verge be replaced as part of the work to renovate the street. In addition, there was some back and forth about the responsibility of the property owners to maintain the verge as well as snow removal of the sidewalk. I don't live on Walnut Street, I reside on Franklin Street. As a result, I was the recent beneficiary of the renovation of both Franklin and its terminus cross street, Grove. The Public Works Department did what seems to be an excellent job in both paving the street and the installation of the new curbs and the restoration of the sidewalk. I would like to use those two recent projects as a reference point to my suggestion tonight about the Walnut Street project. The first issue is the placing of trees in the verge. The concept of the tree in the verge is historic and gives way to bucolic scenes of yesteryear, people strolling along under the grandeur of the shade tree. However, it's a view that does not take into reality the tree itself. Trees in the verge are a major cause of destruction of the sidewalk. The roots destroy the concrete, the tree limbs move to decapitate the passerby, and the curb is pushed into the street. The trees that are prone to dropping acorns and pods create a nuisance and a hazard to the walker. The tall growth of the tree is always a major issue with the electrical and the cable lines, an issue that did not exist in the 1800s. I counted the trees in the verge on Walnut Street. There are 8 between Union and Water, counting both sides. In almost all cases, the trees were directly and visibly a major contributing factor to the sidewalk's destruction. Pictures of the trees in the verge on Walnut Street are there for your reference. It seems an expensive indulgence that has no real benefit to the citizen. The property owner does not take responsibility for the maintenance of the tree, and while not privy to the final cost to redo the sidewalk, I believe the cost is neither trivial and surely money better spent elsewhere. As to the verge itself, on Franklin Street, they created a verge. It requires mowing, litter removal, maintenance, and resulted in a sidewalk that is difficult for 2 people to pass with shoulders squared. By comparison, on Grove Street, they did not install a verge on the western side of the street. That's an error, by the way. They didn't install a verge on either side of the street. Instead, creating a sidewalk that is truly expansive where you can walk 2 abreast with room to spare. While I understand the bylaw mandate that the property owner take care of the verge, why create an environment of conflict and effort to enforce something that has no benefit? I suggest you create a vergeless street for Walnut Street. Let the existing trees on the citizen's property provide the greenery. Benefit is to the long term, viability of the sidewalk installed and the reduction in the maintenance cover cost over the period of the sidewalk's existence. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Swan. Next item on the agenda is a special permit hearing for 10 Shore Lane, and this is an earth removal special permit hearing.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Minutes? Review the minutes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the minutes. Sorry. Review of the minutes. The following minutes are available for review and approval, September 19th, 2018. What's the pleasure of the board?
I move
So-
we... Sorry. Go.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Motion's made to accept the minutes as presented. There any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Next item on the agenda is the earth removal special permit hearing. So if the applicants would come up, the applicant, and sir, if you could say your name, address, and then we'd be happy to hear your explanation of your request.
Okay, my name is Rogério da Silva. I live in North Reading, and we are building in this address, 10 Shore Lane. And would like to apply for a special permit because of the rules of the city, if you have to move more than 200 yards from the lot, you have to apply for that. And we discussed a lot with the administrator of the town, Mr. Ward. And we are here we already removed the earth there to dig the hole for the foundation and move some earth from the front of the lot to the back of the lot, but now the house is there, but it's a pile of earth to be removed that's around 2,000 yards.
Okay, so you had planned to move some earth from the front of the property to the rear, but have discovered that that is not practical?
No, we already moved from the front to the back part,
Okay,
and now the plan is to move from there to other place.
okay.
We already
Now you
contact.
want to remove 2,000 square feet. Okay. That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Any questions from members of the board?
Mr. Chair, I just a couple here. How many truckloads does that entail?
It's around, each truck is 25 yards.
Mhm.
If you say 2,500 yards, it will be 100 trucks, around that.
100
maximum.
trucks? And how long would this take to,
Yeah, we discuss a lot with the site work team. We have two options. One is to remove fast, but of course to be a lot of trucks during the day. And for us, the best scenario is to stay around 20 days of work, 20 to 25 days of work, moving 5 trucks per day, saving the time that it's the rush hours for that. Then to take about 20 days, 20 business days.
what time would it be, from 9 to 5, or would it be?
9 to 3, 4. Last week, a person that is working for the landfill asked me if I would like to remove for that part, because it will be very close. It will be on
Yeah.
35-pound road. And I say, for me, no problem at all. It's
Is that,
okay.
would that
So
be
it will be close.
Okay.
We'll take that route that is official, not to have any problem with the neighbors, with the down part of the street. And that's the plan, because it's close. It's on 10 Shore Lane. You just go up to Pondville Drive, turn right and right. Then on 35 Pondville, on the landfill, the contractor said that they need some earth there.
So that would be 8 hours a day, 9 to 5, and that would be Monday through Friday?
Yeah.
5 days a week for 25 days, 100 trucks. Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you. That's all I had.
Any other questions from members of the board?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, do you have a topographic map that shows us existing grades and what
Yes.
your proposed finish is?
Yeah, we have them, and we have some copies that were
Okay.
sent to the town administrators. Yeah.
Okay, the only one I saw was on a tablet. I would like to see
Oh,
a
if you
paper
would like to
plan.
see this?
Yeah, I would definitely like to have it and review it for discussion the next time we meet.
I'm sorry.
Okay, if you could just leave that here with us,
We'd like to get a
Or
copy.
do you have a copy? Does Michael have a copy?
I sent.
Mike, do you have a copy?
is it that size?
A little bit small, no, it's not that size, a little bit smaller, but,
Yeah, I'd rather see a full-size plan so that we can review it and understand it.
Would the board be able to get that copy there?
for now, yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
Yeah, we are following all the elevations here for this plan. The original plan.
But that plan shows existing conditions and proposed finish grades?
Sir, can you just have a seat so the public can hear you at home, sir? Thank you.
Any other
I
questions?
have a few, yes, but, and it shows, I can see a lot of stuff on there, so I'm sure it shows everything about what the final grades will be, how you're going to landscape it, how it's gonna be treated in its final condition. Okay. If I may, Mr. Chairman, if the board were gonna consider this application, there's a number of items we have to touch base on, and I'm just gonna go through them and offer the applicant an opportunity to comment on each one.
Okay.
With your permission. This board has to consider the social, economic, or community needs which are served by the proposal. Let me read them all to you, and then you can tell us whether you're prepared to discuss that tonight or at another meeting. We need to evaluate the social, economic, or community needs which are served by your proposal, the traffic flow and safety, including parking and loading, adequacy of utilities and other public services, neighborhood character and social structures, impacts on the natural environment, and potential fiscal impact, including impact on town services, tax base, and employment. And if this board considers this application and votes on actually giving you a gravel removal permit, we have to have or you have to have addressed for us each one of those items. It would be helpful if you did that in writing.
Oh, okay, so, sorry, it's the first time that I have this process. I'm in this process for that. I suppose it was more simple than this, because just following the elevations and the digging, but I can prepare whatever the board decides that is.
Well, it is the town bylaw. It's a public document, available to anyone that's pursuing a gravel removal permit. And it's the criteria that we're required to evaluate before we can act on your request.
You can get a copy of that. Michael, I'm sure, would be happy to provide you with that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's online as well, too. It's on the town website.
Yeah, or he could explain to you about it being online at the town website.
That's all I have at this time, Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
any other questions, comments? There being none, we would hear now from anybody who is present who would like to speak in favor of this proposal. Is there anyone here to speak in favor? Okay, there anybody here to speak in opposition or who wish to express concerns about the proposal? We would hear them now. I see the gentleman in the rear, Mr. LeBlanc.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
If
James
you would say,
LeBlanc,
yeah,
44
no.
Pondview Drive. In addition to Mr. Connolly's concerns, as you all know, the road is private. It's not a public road. And Mr. McGowan's department does an admirable job keeping up with what they can to patch holes and address the concerns of the road conditions so that they can continue doing the roadside recycling and trash pickup. I'm not asking you to vote in favor or against this. What I'm asking you to consider is if you're going to grant the permit to the applicant, that you do so conditionally. I'm going to ask that you do it with a conditional permit that he have a paving company that will, at the end of this project, come in and resurface Pondview Drive and Shore Lane all the way down to his lot. Because it's a private road, it is not the responsibility of the community to repair the road, and Chris's department does what they can, but because it's private, you know, it's the responsibility of the residents to really take care of it. And I hope you would consider that request to have the entire stretch repaved by this applicant for the number of trucks that he's going to have going over the road. That's all I have.
I just have a question, Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes, sir.
Is the road paved now?
Yes, it's
So
paved.
it's hot-topped?
It is hot-topped
Okay.
all the way in,
Yeah.
but the road is precarious at best. Anyone, you're all invited to come down and take a look at the condition of the road, but it is paved. And it's not paved to what the town would consider normal standards.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, we're just hearing now,
Okay.
we're, you know. Is there any other comment with regard to this proposal? There being none, we'll close this public hearing to the general public, and I'll turn it over to members of the board for discussion and possible disposition.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we, after everybody's had an opportunity to comment tonight, that we continue this public hearing to our next meeting and ask that the applicant address these items in the bylaw in writing prior to our meeting, so we have an opportunity to have reviewed it. It doesn't need to be lengthy. It doesn't have, it's not a lot of work. But it is a requirement that each one of these items be addressed in some way. At some point, when you deem appropriate, I'd like to make a motion to continue the hearing and ask that the applicant provide that information to us in writing prior to our next meeting.
Okay. Any other comments from members of the board?
I'll second Mr. Selectman Conley's
Is that a
motion.
motion?
That was a motion.
I'll second
Okay,
that.
so you're seconding, so we have a motion to continue the public hearing, to give the board an opportunity to review the plans that have been submitted, and also to give the applicants an opportunity to respond to the criteria that's outlined in the town's bylaw, and which have been enumerated by Mr. Connolly. There any discussion?
Just under discussion, Mr. Chair, just another question from Mr. Texera. Have you built, is there a house on the lot right now currently?
Yes.
Okay, so what is the, I guess, what is the reason for you moving all the soil? Are you looking to,
We
is
just
there a
adapt-
big, is there
we
a
just
non-level lot?
we just followed the adaptations for the original plans, for the elevation. And then when we start to discuss, and I suppose that after the approval of the building permit, if we follow the plans that are there in the town, it will be okay. So after that, I just follow the plans that were approved by the development before, and I keep all the levels. When the problem of the removal of earth will be that big, we ask the engineers, Whitman and Bingham, if it's possible to build a little bit higher, to take less earth from there, and I modify the plan. I pay $1,500 more for them. Then instead of stay on 359 for the top of foundation, we stay at 365 to remove less, but we still have some earth to remove after the digging of the foundation. I just follow the plans, the original plans for the development.
Okay. And you're at 10 Shore Lane, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Just another question. Where on this map, plan is the actual storage of the excess material?
In what plan, what, sorry?
Where is the, based on what I've heard, there's a large amount of surplus material stored on site. Could you show me on this plan where that is?
Oh, yes.
It's up here.
They are here, yes.
Okay. All right.
This is the new plan that you put more elevation to less earth.
This structure's already built,
This structure is already there, yes.
and this grading is already in place?
Yes.
So,
Just the
so
pile is here.
your proposal is to remove the pile, not lower, not go below,
No. It's- no, it's all-
whatever the final 376 is here.
Exactly, yeah.
That would be the finished grade up here.
That's what they included for the Whitman Beacon, not to have a badge or something like this, just with low piece.
Okay, but this is the slope here, and that's going to stay at 376.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other,
We need a copy.
We need that.
yeah, he needs to look at that. Any other discussion? Okay, and I should say that we did have a written communication from Mr. Wendy Williams and maybe Alan Williams concerning this, and the board does have that. No more discussion, motions
Mr. Chairman,
made.
can I just make are you continuing it to a specific date?
To the date of our next meeting.
Okay, what is it, so 2 weeks from tonight? Yeah. Just because, anyone here, they need to have notice.
Okay.
So 2 weeks from tonight.
Well, it's actually, that's right, sorry, yes. Later in the month it gets.
So we have a motion made and seconded to continue this public hearing until a date 2 weeks from tonight, October 17th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. So, sir, if you can get together with Michael, and he'll provide you with how to get to the webpage, and we'll look at this, and we'll reopen the meeting in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you had a copy that size, but,
I just have this one. If you want, I can, tomorrow I can do one.
Okay.
okay.
Mike?
Probably 5. Yeah, if you
No,
had 5.
You know what, I don't need one. I will rely on Mr. Connolly, because I'm going to tell you, that stuff is Greek to me. So don't waste your money on
What
it.
I have in the packet's fine. Maybe just 4. Or 3.
Yeah.
Next item on the agenda is the recreational marijuana proposal. The Board of Selectmen received a letter from Emerald City's grower interested in seeking a letter of non-opposition to site a recreational marijuana cultivation facility at 843 Main Street in Clinton. The applicant has submitted a draft host community agreement and a security plan since the last meeting, and the Emerald City growers have submitted a number of documents which we've all had the opportunity to review, and the purposes of tonight's meeting, I believe, was to make a determination as to which direction we might wish to go in. So I will open it up to members of the board for their opinions and observations.
Mr. Chairman, if I, just to open up discussion, I'd make a motion that we move forward on the next step of approving the application or giving the applicant what they need by requesting that town council and the town administrator negotiate a satisfactory host community agreement between the applicant and the town.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Chairman, just under discussion, I'm gonna be voting no. Reason why is because this property was, the Drug Task Force raided it several months ago, and I believe for 13 months, the landlord did not do regular checks or inspections on their rental property. Somebody could have got hurt. I believe the tenant's behavior is a responsibility of the landlord. I believe the landlord could have known, should have known, and they were supposed to know what was going on at their property. I'm going to be voting no.
Any other discussion?
Under discussion, Mr. Chairman, pending satisfactory agreement being reached between the applicant and the town, I'm inclined to support their application, but they need to be aware that their legacy in this community with various department heads and that the attitude that they have expressed over the years dealing with various entities in the town does not do their application well. And I'm hoping going forward, their attitude has improved significantly.
Okay, anything else? Okay, now, let me just say that it is my understanding, and I will ask town council to correct me if I'm wrong. It is my belief that as the applicants are applying for a recreational marijuana cultivation facility, that they do not at this time need a letter of support or opposition from the Board of Selectmen. What they need is a negotiated community host agreement. And so that's what we're talking about here tonight.
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay,
You
good.
know, unless the applicant's planning on doing, cultivating for medical, the medical is still under the health,
DPH.
exactly, so you would need the letter of no opposition, but if you're just gonna do adult use, that's it, that's what you're cultivating for. You don't need that letter of no opposition, but you do obviously need a community host.
Should I step up and speak? Because we were told, initially I was told by Phil Duffy that the first thing that I needed was a three-step process. The first step was to come to the town and get the letter of no opposition first. Then we go to the state and then come back to the planning board. So we were trying to get a letter of no opposition.
That is the process under the medical, but now that the adult use cannabis control commission's in place, if you're not gonna do medical at all, and eventually, it's all gonna be, the medical's gonna go away, it's gonna be all under the control commission. So, but if that's all you're doing right now, you don't need the letter of no opposition, but you do need community host.
Okay. Any other discussion? If none, I will just say I intend to vote for this, and I'll tell you why. For many years now, I've been opposed to additional used car dealerships here in the town of Clinton. And I have on a couple of occasions raised an argument to oppose them, and in all instances, my fellow board members point out that the property is owned by this person, it's in a properly zoned area, and so it's not incumbent upon us to tell them they can't do something. And so now when we have a used car license, I don't bother wasting the board's time by offering an argument that I know is not going to fly. I just vote for it. And I'm going to apply the same criteria to this. The other thing is, and I do share my colleague, Mr. Sargent's concern about the prior operation down there, but the fact is that no charges were filed against the owners, and so they weren't convicted, they weren't found, there were no charges filed, so they have a clean slate in that regard. So, any more discussion?
Just
The
real,
motion-
just real
yes.
quick, Mr. Chair, just, wish them the best luck in the process. It's nice to see a vacant building being used, and I hope you guys succeed in your endeavors. That's all I can say.
And I would say to the public that there is in the draft community host agreement a commitment to hire, to give first preference for jobs to residents of Clinton. So the motion is to move to develop a community host agreement between Emerald City Growers and Town Council. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed?
Opposed?
No. So it passes 3-2. Good luck.
Look,
Next item on the agenda is administrative business, late night closings. The following establishments are requesting late night closings for Saturdays in the month of October: Clinton Turnverine, Crystal Cafe, Liberty Tavern, Rigside Cafe, Spruce Street Tavern, The Simple Man Saloon, and Polish American Club. What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to grant the late night closings. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Next item on the agenda is old and new business, and the first item under old and new business is the High Street TIP Design Contract Amendment. The Superintendent of Public Works is requesting approval of a design contract amendment for Green International Affiliates Incorporated to provide a full-depth reconstruction of the High Street TIP project instead of the overlay proposed by Mass DOT. Mr.
So what I'm requesting is an additional $30,742.47, which would cover design costs for Green International, the design engineers on the project. So the original project was designed with a mill and overlay, so what that means is they would just take 1.5 inches of the pavement off the top, install all the curbing, all the sidewalks, and then come in and overlay the road. So in that case, when they draw these plans, they basically have to fit the project in with the existing grades of the road. So as the project went along, which I was against that design in the first place, but Mass Highway is paying the bill, so they kind of directed it towards the mill and overlay. As we got further into the project, they finally agreed that we should do either a full depth reconstruction or a pulverize and regrade and pave. So what the town ends up getting out of this is, instead of basically the same profile of asphalt, which could be anywhere from 3 to 6 inches thick, we get a road basically the same as what we got on Water Street, 7.5 inches of pavement, very heavy duty road. And what needs to be done in order to get to that point now is, because the original drawings were drawn based on what the original road looked like, so it was based on the original cross sections of that road all the way down the road. Now we have to comply to Mass Highway and federal highway standards, so the crown of the road will change so that it pitches better, and it'll be much better for drainage, and all in all, it's a much better job for the town. But it's a substantial amount of work for the design engineer. He's got to change basically all the cross sections on the whole road. It's about 50 some odd sheets of plans that he has to revise every single one of those. So that's what the cost of it is. His original cost was quite a bit higher than that, and I thought it was a little exorbitant, so I negotiated him down to this price, which I believe is a fair price. It's in line with the amount of work we're doing, and it gives the town a much better project. And I propose that we pay this out of Chapter 90, which is how we're funding the rest of the design.
Any questions for members of the board or comments?
Mr. Chair, what was the price tag on that?
It was like $30,700, and it's on the next to the last page of this.
And that's going, go ahead. sorry.
$30,742.47. So just as a comparison, the entire project, including that change, is about $226,000. So,
Yeah. No, I think it's money well spent.
12 or 13% more to get you're probably looking at $600,000 to $700,000 of additional work. So that's the benefit to the town. So
and
it's
that's
going to
going-
give us a much better
And
route.
that's going from the intersection of Water Street all the way down to Allen, correct?
From Water to Allen, yeah.
Nice, okay.
And this project
Thank
is
you.
actually, hopefully it's gonna bid next spring. We're working on right-of-way stuff right now, and, which is a big project for Bob and myself, and they're scheduled to bid sometime late spring to maybe start construction.
Correct
next
me
year.
if I'm wrong, though, there is a public meeting on Thursday, October 11th, 2018.
There's a meeting, it's not a public hearing, yes, you're right, a public meeting.
Needed.
Just to discuss the right-of-way. So we sent between myself and Bob Gibbons in his office, we've sent out letters to all the abutters requesting, we have to get easements on all the property, just like we did on Water Street. So we're requesting donations from the abutters, and we invited them to a meeting here that night to answer any questions or concerns that they have. And they're also all welcome just to come straight to my office instead of coming here, which several people have already done. And we're just starting the process of getting the easements that we need to do this work.
Awesome.
Roughly about 104 easements.
Yeah, it's a lot, yeah. The easements are basically, most of them are temporary easements where we have to build the sidewalk, and the sidewalk goes basically to the edge of the right-of-way. So we need access onto their property to form it, strip it, tie their features back into what we're doing. So
You
it's
do the
all,
same
most of
thing
them
on
are
Water Street.
temporary. They're either temporary or they're overhead utility wires. You know, they need, we need aerial easements actually to put overhead wires. So some of the poles are getting relocated. So there's a lot of, those are permanent easements, but most of them are just the temporary easements for construction.
Yeah, I remember you did that for Water Street, it was quite the
We did
task.
the
I
whole
remember
thing.
a lot of them.
It's
you
a
were setting
long,
up,
it's a
yeah.
long, difficult process.
It's a long street, yeah. That's all I had, Mr. Chair.
Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? or
Yeah,
comments?
I think you were starting to say it, but we cut you off. The bids hopefully go out in the spring, and then how does this affect the
Yeah,
timetable?
late spring, early summer, and it's probably gonna be about a one-year project, so it'll start hopefully sometime next year. You know, that's the bid, then they gotta go through the contract phase. It might start next fall and
Does
then
it
go
stretch
till
it
the
out a
next
lot
fall.
longer, doing the full reconstruction?
So that- it really doesn't add, it adds almost no time.
Okay.
That work really, the pulverizing and the first coat of pavement is a couple days,
Great.
really. It's very quick.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? There being none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion that we grant the request.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to grant the request of the Superintendent of Public Works for the design contract amendment for Green International Affiliates to provide a full depth reconstruction of the High Street tip project. Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks,
Thank
Christopher.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the work in
Yes.
getting us a better project.
It's been great.
Next item under old and new business is the Conservation Commission alternate member. The Conservation Commission is requesting if the Board of Selectmen can create an alternate member for their commission that can be available to make quorums for meetings similar to the zoning Board of Appeals. As just a bit of background, the Conservation Commission on occasion does have trouble getting a quorum, and they're dealing with people that need to go before them before engaging in some construction or some change in their property, so it is of some importance. So they're requesting that we create an alternate member position. So what's the feeling of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask that we refer this to town council and the town administrator to advise us first on whether or not we can appoint alternates to the Conservation Commission, and if so, what the liability for the people that are appointed is in regards to, I know on other boards like the planning board and the ZBA, if the ones that have alternates, if you don't sit in on the initial part of a process, you can't participate in the end. So I want to make sure that we're not just creating another problem.
And I think
If
there's
we
something,
can appoint
yeah.
an alternate.
I think there's some too, if they miss, with the regular members that miss so many meetings, they, there's something to
Right.
take.
Well, I'd like to ask that we refer this to town council.
Absolutely.
For an
Okay.
advisory.
I'll plan to review it and then get back to the board at the next scheduled meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, motion's made and seconded to refer this to town council for an advisory opinion as to whether we're able to do that. All in favor, we've had discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Next item is the paramedic study request for proposals. Town meeting funded $50,000 to conduct a study on the feasibility of adding paramedic services to the Clinton EMS department. The town administrator would like to review the scope of services to hire a consultant to perform this work. And so, Michael, I'll turn the table over to you, and I see that we have the chief and deputy chief here, and I expect we'll be hearing from them. But now,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome the chief and deputy chief here. I think they wanted to be here in the event there were any questions, the board had any explanations that they wanted from them, so they're here to listen and participate if you so choose. I just put together kind of, in my thinking and with some input from the chief and deputy on some of the issues that I think could be addressed as part of the study. We're looking to make a major impact to the services we're providing for EMS here at the Clinton Fire Department, and I think these are some of the issues that I think should be further research done. The Deputy Seibert has done a lot on this already, as the board has the report that he provided during the budget process, and a lot of information has been studied, but I think there are a lot more issues and put into a broader context of what this cost is going to be, what the needs of the service, the impact to the service, and an overall, like a 5-year plan of how we're going to be able to sustain this and to be able to implement and fund it and sustain it. Once we give the community this assurance that we're going to go this way, then we got to be able to keep it going. So I just thought these are some of the issues that I felt could be discussed, and wanted to see if the board had any input on that or any further expansion on some of these points.
Michael, I'll tell you the truth, I'm having trouble finding not the documents submitted by the fire department.
I've got it
144, 145.
That's what I'm
Okay.
seeing too.
So, all right, so I got it in paper now, all right. Okay.
So I could just briefly, I just kind of try to break into categories and then have some bullets under each category. And again, we put an RFP. I want to give at least the consultants some idea of what we're looking for. So when people are bidding on this, they know what they're getting into. This doesn't necessarily have to be all inclusive or encompassing. We can put, these items and whatever comes up as needed once the firm gets hired, but at least to know some of the things that we're looking for. So in my first grouping, I just talked about to determine the need for paramedic service, analyzing the current runs of the basic EMT that we're doing now, the advanced life support that we're doing through a private contractor right now, and mutual aid when the private contractor isn't available, which does come up often. So what are the calls for service right now? How many are BLS? How many are ALS? What are response times to those calls? Are we meeting standards in both of those areas? How can we do better? Review of our mutual aid agreements, the private ambulance contract that we have for ALS right now, how are those working? And then maybe looking at models of what comparable sized communities are doing for EMS, in the public sector. How are they handling it? How are they running their service with paramedics or private contracts? So kind of just giving us an overview of determining the need. The other would be looking at staffing. If we do go forward and say that this is what you want to do, what are the staffing needs? I think the proposal is that looking at 8 new hires of paramedics in order to provide the service, looking for per shift staffing to make those calls according to the standards, and also enough to do a 24/7 service as well too. My understanding is once through the fire officials is through the state licensing is that once you start, you have to go all in. So it's something we can't, I asked, well, can we do it, first shift and kind of phase it in over a period of years? And they indicated that, it's either all or none. So once we start, we're gonna have to be able to find a way to provide coverage. So what are those staffing needs? We have proposal of 8. How is that rotation gonna work with 8 people? How many per shift? How many we'll need for filling in, for backfilling, and that type of thing. So, what are the staffing needs per call? If we have multiple calls, how do we handle that? Some of these type of things. I think the board talked about should we be paramedic only or paramedic firefighter. I think the fire officials felt if they had both certifications, then they could help out on both sides of the service. So if they're not in a EMS call, they could respond to fire calls as well too. Options for the town to assist existing EMTs to become paramedics. I know there has been some surveying of some of the current members as to who might be interested in doing this. How can we go about helping to facilitate that, to get more people of our current staff to become paramedics? Also too, what would be the needs of the department to run the full paramedic, EMS, and fire safety? So how many do we need? I think there's a feeling of, are we gonna hire initially and then through attrition absorb them into the department? Or are these new hires gonna become added personnel to the service? So to take a look at that question as well too. I have in here the state licensing requirements. What, like I just talked about, what is needed to get this started? Do we need to make any other operational or management changes to comply with state regulations? A whole list. The next topic about budgetary impacts. Obviously, it would be very desirable to have this medical response for our ambulance and for our constituents' service. But again, looking at the total picture, we have a finite pool of dollars, and how do we do that? So what would be the added salary, benefit, training costs, equipment retrofits? Some of as Deputy Seibert did a lot of work on looking at insurance billing reimbursement and added revenue that will be brought in with paramedics. How does that number compare with the actual costs of running the service? Will it cover it? Will there be a shortfall? If there is a shortfall, where can we find some additional revenue to make that up? I know Selectman Sargent mentioned at the last meeting about maybe dedicating the meals tax to this service. So these are all type of things of how can we get creative and find a way to fund it. Doing a 5-year cost projection and whether we can sustain that over a 5-year period based on costs and revenues. Regionalization opportunities, whether we could look at if you don't go paramedic, what would be the cost of having a 24-hour coverage in town? Right now, we're not getting that with our current contract. If we have to enhance that contract, how much is that going to cost? And is that going to cost more than allowing the department to do it themselves? Those type of costs. There was discussed by some of the fire officials is, would there be an ability to do ambulance transport, so which could generate more revenue, which could help pay for that? Is that feasible with the number of calls we have to be able to do transports when we're responding to in the field as well too? So again, looking at all of the data that we have from the department of the history, a 5-year history, and looking at how do we project that 5 years forward in order to provide a cost benefit of this service. And again, just a few other things, impacts of the central dispatch. Is there any additional training requirements for dispatch or reporting that dispatch needs to do in order to take on this service? I don't know that answer. But it just something to touch upon, again, to make sure that every piece of the puzzle that impacts that service will be looked at, and we know up front going in, we know all our costs, we know our plans, like when Conley mentioned last meeting, to have an implementation plan so that we know what we're doing when we go forward, and we have all these bases covered. The next bullet was the implementation plan for paramedic service, looking at collective bargaining contracts, hiring process. If we're going to be hiring 8 people, that's a huge undertaking to do at one time. Civil service requirements, training, qualifications, timeline. Can we hire people and bring them to the academy or train them as we're hiring others and kind of stagger that and have a go live date? The other is to look at the impact of the Clinton Hospital Emergency Department right now. Right now, we have a hospital in town. What level of cases can go to that hospital? So right now, I'm told that there are certain levels of trauma that can't be brought there. So if we're having outside paramedics coming in now, they are bringing them out of town. So what calls will go to Clinton Hospital, what calls will go out of town? How many calls are going to be going out of town means what are we going to be able to do to cover the service that when they're out of town, another call comes in, what do we need to cover that service there as well too? Also, what if the Clinton Hospital ER closes and we can't bring patients there at all? That's going to have a huge impact on how we're going to run the service, and we transport patients to other locations. Talking about some of the legal issues, again, to make sure that every base is covered. Our insurance requirements, our legal liabilities, to make sure that we've covered all of that and talked to all the people we need to make sure we're doing this right. And then also, if this consultant has been doing this in the field, hopefully they'll leave us kind of with a list of best practices or a manual of best practices as to how we can efficiently run a paramedic service. So these are some of the things that I just came up with as a starting point, or at least kind of a roadmap that we want to give a consultant of things that they want to look at. And obviously, it would be working hand in hand with the fire department in order to get a lot of this data. But just so the board and the public would know, these are some of the issues that I think should be looked at in going forward with this service, and asked if the board had any others that maybe I forgot or weren't thinking about, or felt that we could maybe go with this, and maybe afterwards, once we hire a firm, kind of give final direction at that point, we can do that as well too. So.
Okay. Thank you. So basically, this is the scope. This is a scope of services that you would intend to include in the RFP.
Exactly.
And you're asking the board tonight if there are any additional things that they would like to see added. And I don't know when it would be appropriate. Would you like to say something, Chief, or the Deputy
Well, just
Chief?
a couple things. Michael and I talked, we don't really know of any companies like offhand that do this type of study. So I reached out to the FCAM, Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts, just sent off an email to them. They pitched it off just recently, just to ask any other departments that have gone through this type of study, they can give us any advice of, say, a company that does or doesn't do it, or give us some advice. I got one company back just recently, but I read it just quickly, and it was all fire studies. So there was no EMS study. But I'll still take a good look at it. And then I got a response from a fire chief that's just some just different advice that I've got a copy of that. Some of the other things, when I do my monthly report, I talk about how many EMS calls we make, how many fire calls we make. We just got done talking the last few weeks about that, to try to disseminate them a little bit, just for us, so we can show, our estimate is 50% of our calls are ALS calls. So now what I mean by disseminate is I'm doing spreadsheets at the station. So what we're trying to look at is like transports, refusals, and then of the transports, what percentage of those is actual ALS calls. So we're just starting to kind of get a spreadsheet.
What is an
set.
ALS call?
Advanced life support.
Okay, so that's...
So there's a criteria.
That's a paramedic call. Okay, all right.
And like Mike said, there's certain calls that, there's a list of them that don't go to Clinton. People are having a heart attack. They don't go to Clinton. They put them on the monitor and they see they're having a heart attack. They do not go to Clinton. They go right to the cath lab. So.
They don't go to Clinton Hospital to get stable, then go?
No, they don't. No, they got to go right to a cath lab when they know they're having a STEMI.
There's work they'll do inside the heart through a catheter that Clinton isn't capable of doing. Chief there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I got two things that I would like to present to you to at least consider under the scope of services. Mr. Ward mentioned that it's either all or nothing when it comes to paramedics. That's perhaps my fault for not presenting that properly to Mr. Ward. We have 3 years to implement it. And the way it starts off is 8-hour shift of paramedic. So essentially 1 8-hour shift per day for up to 6 months. That's what the state allows. After that, we go to 2 shifts. So 2 8-hour shifts for another 6 months. And then it's slowly implemented up to 3 years. So the first thing that I would like to see, that I would propose to have put on under the scopes of services, under budgetary impacts, is number 1, SAFER grant, considering that one specific grant. And what that grant is that's a grant for coverage of men. So the grant will pick up, I believe it's 80% the first year of staffing needs. The second year will be 60%. The third year, I believe, is 45%. The percentages that are not picked up by the state, it's a national grant, excuse me, will be picked up by the town. But the good thing, if we are looking at implementing possibly ALS paramedic for budget season 2020, if we're looking out essentially a year, that's going to allow us to hire people after the budget's approved for 2020. It's going to give us 3 years of coverage financially under that SAFER grant, while providing us the 3 years to implement the ALS service. So in a lot of the paperwork that we presented to you back at the beginning of the year, we were projecting out we could possibly make funds by doing transports. This is what the town's going to recoup financially. That would allow us to get our feet, if you will, underneath ourselves over the first 3 years without having to fully incur that financial impact just ourselves. The second one that I would like you to at least consider putting on here and possibly studying, having the consultant look at it, it seems like every 2 weeks when you folks have your meetings up here, somebody's coming to you to talk about marijuana. Mr. Sargent, I believe, spoke 2 weeks ago about tying in the meal service tax to support the paramedics. I would like you to consider tying in somewhat of the marijuana impact that we're going to receive as a community financially to support the paramedic. But unless you got any questions, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay.
I got a question. The lady that was talking about 55 Sterling Street, was that something she said there was marijuana people were in there looking at that?
They're considering it.
Really? So right now.
It hasn't come to us yet.
No, I thought that's what she said. So right now, we have Tyka well involved. We have Brook Street. We're gonna have Main Street, so that makes 3 that I'm fully aware of. And then I'm not saying there, but I'm saying if they opportunity.
They're not alone.
Huh?
They're not alone.
Well, okay, so there's 4. That's,
This
I
town,
guess my question is there a limit?
is the town bylaw that states that we're gonna have 2 dispensaries in the town of Clinton.
There's no
But-
limit
But
on
we can have a limit.
cultivation.
Yeah, like the folks that were in tonight, they're not looking to sell retail, they're just looking to cultivate.
Yeah, no, that's
So
fine.
there's no limit on cultivation.
Yeah.
You can have as many as the board wants to approve for host
Right,
community.
okay.
You can only have, in our town, only 2.
2 dispensaries,
Yes.
Yes.
but dispensaries for medical or dispensaries for personal consumption?
Oh,
Yeah, right now, you can only have 2 for adult use.
Adult
One is
use is
Tyka.
recreation.
One is Tyka.
Well, now eventually Tyga's probably, they before us was for a medical, eventually.
They went,
No,
No, they
they
weren't
converted.
both.
They converted, right, they converted. They have both.
I'm just trying to
So Tyka
understand how much we're gonna get here, that's all.
You
We
can
got a
only
lot of
keep-
vacant
We're committed to
buildings.
one of 2. I mean, we've
Right.
backed one of 2.
Yeah,
one of the 2 retails right now. That's
okay, gotcha.
but we also gotta remember, we can't use all that money.
Oh, no,
Our
I
roads are
understand.
off,
No,
our
I understand
sidewalks
that.
are off.
I'm just wondering, like, is there a limit? Where's this gonna go, that's all? Because it's a big undertaking when these people come in. I mean, even for us, the plans are pages and stacks of them to understand them and everything.
Okay, the fire department has made 2 suggestions. One is to include in the scope of work an assessment of a SAFER grant,
Yes, sir.
SAFER,
Yes, sir.
okay? And the other one was to consider the possibility of some of the revenue generated by the marijuana facilities be earmarked for this project. Does the board have any objection to
The other one
that?
was the 3 years to implement as well.
Well, that's what the SAFER thing
Yes,
is,
sir.
yeah.
That falls under the SAFER grant.
Right.
It does,
Those come
okay.
with prerequisites.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Does the board have any objection to those things being
No.
added?
Mr. Chair.
I'm in favor.
Yes.
I don't, it's a timing thing. How long, or is there grants, or the deadlines for the grant? Can we still get it for this year?
Yeah, I can find that information for you. I don't have it offhand. I know approximately a month ago, it was Holden received 6 firefighter, paramedic positions supported by the SAFER grant, and Westboro received 8. And that was just issued approximately a month ago. So as far as the timeline, when the paperwork, what the deadline is, I can find that out, but offhand, I don't have it.
And the other thing about the cannabis, I mean, we're kind of lagging on that too. I guess I saw something in the paper where the state has had to dial back its revenue estimates for next year just because the Cannabis Control Commission hasn't approved anything yet. So, you know, we've done an agreement with TICA, but they're still in the
Conception stage.
Application
Yeah.
stage.
I'm meeting with
It's gonna
them
take
this
some
week.
time.
Yeah, so, you know, I'd love to say we could earmark some of that, I just don't know what we're
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
have.
But it's,
Just something to consider.
Yes,
Yeah,
it's
Mr.
make-believe money right now.
Mr. Chair, if I
It's
could,
coming.
there is the, as Mr. Kerrigan referred to, there is the local sales tax that we have, but there is also a local impact
Right.
fee percentage that's being paid through the hosted community agreements as well, too. So that's something, maybe if we can get an estimate on what those amounts would be, that could be a source that could be, you know, funded partially or it's funneled through for this as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I support adding the fire department's requests to the list, but I have some questions, just informational questions. Right now, Clinton receives ALS services from a private vendor. Is that 24/7?
No.
So what happens when a call comes in that requires ALS transport or just ALS response? What happens in Clinton?
We hope Sterling can cover us.
And Sterling has a
ALS.
24/7 ALS
Correct.
service.
And if they don't cover us, and we feel, the guys on the street that feel that it's definitely needed, then we'll shift. We'll go to Woods, we'll go to West Boylston, we'll go wherever, and, you know, hope that you can get it, you can provide it. However, it's all in time.
Meanwhile, somebody's waiting.
Absolutely.
Our most common approach while we're working on the street is if we go for Vital and they're not available, we go to Sterling. The problem with that is we're not only slowing the response to our own community, but we're stripping another community of their own services for the period of time that they're here in town. There have been multiple calls where, depending on the direction of travel, if we don't have ALS available to us, we're treating it with basics, and if we have to go to Worcester, we're either looking for Worcester EMS to meet up with us as an ALS, as a paramedic unit. We're calling West Boylston, who's another community that has ALS. We would then be stripping them of their services. So having our own, it definitely has its benefits here in town.
Sterling, is it a call fire department?
No, they have 24 coverage now.
They have 24/7.
Yes, sir.
They provide, and they provide ALS service.
They do.
24/7, yeah.
And do they provide the ALF services with their own personnel, or
They
do
do.
they have a subcontract with?
No, they have their own firefighter paramedics that provide the service.
All right.
And is that their staffing level for ALS the same?
No, they're, what, they're 3 per shift?
And then they do per diems.
Yeah.
They still have per diems.
You gotta remember Sterling is a farm community, not like Clinton, so. Clinton's
Well, it's a smaller population.
Yeah, smaller population, but spread out hugely.
Yeah.
But they're still providing that
Oh,
service
yeah,
to
they are,
the
24/7.
community. And the private entities that are doing this, it's a profitable business for them.
It's profitable, sure, but Leominster, a community similar in scope to Clinton, but the size is much larger, they have issues with MedStar. They have a contract very similar to what Clinton has with Vital. And anytime their ALS rigs through MedStar aren't available, Leominster's doing the same thing. They're treating with their BLS people, and depending on where they're going, if they need to have an ALS unit from somewhere else come in, they rely on Sterling very frequently to come in and provide their South Leominster with coverage. If they're going to Worcester, same thing. They'll have Sterling or West Boylston meet up with them to get that ALS truck and paramedic in the back to treat the people.
So
it's-
you're saying Leominster is subcontracting their paramedics?
I can't speak for how exactly they're handling it, but they do have their paramedics coming from MedStar. Financially, how they handle it, I can't speak for that.
They're not
But they're also,
town.
they're also a transport, so
Gotcha.
if they go to the Leominster Hospital, transport somebody out of town, that puts them out of service.
Right.
So I wanna say, if my memory serves me correct, Leominster's like 5,500 medical calls a year. And Chief Sidlow said that it's growing higher and higher population that they can't get ALS from MedStar.
But I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there are private entities providing this service, and they don't do it for charity, they do it for profit.
That's correct.
So the income generated by the service has the likelihood of making this service self-supporting or close to it.
To a certain degree, yes.
Not saying that that's a
Right.
requirement of us going forward with implementing this, but after it's up and running, it is enterprise fund income that can pay the primary costs of running the service and providing the service to our own citizens.
Basically, what it breaks down to, for the private ambulance services, there's more money in a transport from hospital to hospital, from nursing facility to a hospital, to a long-term healthcare to a hospital, than there is in the emergency side of it. So you look at Woods staffs an ambulance in Lancaster all the time. However, what they do is, their biggest transport is prison. So they have a contract, so Lancaster doesn't have to go to the prison, because they would live in the prison all the time. Those guys would just be in the prison all the time. So Woods Ambulance goes to the prison, and then they backfill an ALS unit out of Gardner. A lot of times it doesn't make it down in time. So that's basically how it works. Same thing with Vital. When Vital took on the agreement with us, they were doing the transports from Clinton Hospital. Patients needs to go to Worcester, needs to go to Boston. So that's the reason that they're out of service for us such a long time, because they're constantly leaving, transporting patients from Clinton to other facilities. So what I'm saying is the money's in the transports. That's one of the reasons why we talked about in the study of the transports, because that's where the money is.
One ALS transport, Mr. Conley, is $1,500 plus $26 per mile for the rig. So as we spoke about 8 months ago now, if we had a backup ambulance that we were able to look at doing transports with solely for transports, with firefighters already being paid for by the community, already supported and trained, working for the community, with that third ambulance, we would be able to do that $1,500 plus $26 per mile. Granted, that's only $26 per mile while loaded. So if we had to go to Boston, Brigham and Women, Cambridge, you name it, it would be that $26 per mile to the drop-off location, to the drop-off hospital. But that's funding that would help support the ALS service for the community. It's definitely there, it is.
That's what I'm getting at. It is we're not a profit-oriented organization, but it is profitable if private companies are running the service. There's no reason why we can't significantly mitigate the cost of, and that's what this study is gonna help us show, but that's my expectation.
Anything else? All right, so, go ahead, David, I'm sorry.
Just when are we gonna be voting on the consultant, or when are you gonna be bringing it?
Well, I think if the board is okay with the current scope, with the additions from the chief and the deputy, then we can finalize the RFP to put out to advertisement and start getting, so the next time it can come back to the board is with proposals from companies. So if the board's okay, not, which I could email it to, but if you don't feel you need to vote on the whole RFP, as long as you're good with the scope, I'll put the RFP together and get it out to bid.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
And then, usually probably give them 3 or 4 weeks to put together a proposal, so hopefully, a little over a month, we can have some companies to review, and then that gives them the winter and into the budget season to get a report that we can talk about with the Selectmen and Finance Committee at budget time.
Awesome, thank you, Michael.
So moved, Mr. Chairman?
Second?
Motion's made to approve this scope of services that is presented by Michael with the addition of the 2 elements submitted or suggested by the fire department. Is there any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Have a good night.
2.
Next item on the agenda is the monthly report format for department managers. The Board of Selectmen will review the proposed format for monthly reporting information from town departments. A draft outline is available for review. What's the pleasure of the board?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to accept the draft as it's been presented. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
did we have a chance to run this by department heads?
I was going to ask that, yeah. Did we have a chance to run this by the department heads?
I haven't talked to all of them yet, no, but I think this, from my feeling, I think this covered the main things that we want them to provide us. So it's just for them to put it within the format of what their information is gonna, how that's gonna fit within these categories. So I think it's looking for what the board wants to
Content.
see, and then for them to then to conform to those requirements. So I think, I think it's fine. I'll be fine and finish my discussions with them and let them know that this is gonna be required, that we're gonna want them to do this. And once they have the template set up, hopefully it would just be adding data each month, so it shouldn't be too onerous to try and get that for the board to review every month or within a reasonable time thereafter. So we'll work on each department on how they're going to format their data. But I think what I was looking for was direction from the board on these major categories. So.
And I would think that once the department heads begin using it, they'll begin noticing deficiencies and,
It's a living document,
yeah,
Mr. Chair.
so we can make changes as
Tweak it as we
required.
go along.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, motion's made and seconded to accept it as presented. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Last item on the next item under old and new business is goals and objectives discussion. There any goals and objectives discussions? There being none, committee reports. Any committee reports?
Just real quick, under committee reports, the Cable Committee is meeting tomorrow night here at 6:30 at the upper conference room here in the Town Hall. We're going to be going over content for possibly review on town website, posting that up, and also contract with Comcast that is due, I believe, 2019 of November. So it's coming up, and so we're going to talk about that as well.
Okay, any other committee reports?
Mr. Chairman, I just had a question. When is the tax classification subcommittee going to be coming up with the findings?
That's a great question, Mr. Sargent, and I actually had it on my list to talk to the town assessor. I know he asked me for a little more time to prepare a final report, and I need to talk to him to see how close he is and when we can get that done, because I'm eager to, wrap that up too, so the board has time to digest anything we come up with. Again, as I said before, I don't think we're going to have a strong opinion either way based on the evidence or lack thereof we've seen so far, but I'd like to at least finish our charge in time for the tax classification hearing in December. So I'll have a report at our next meeting, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Any other committee reports or questions? There being none,
Can I tag one more thing on?
sure you can.
Sorry, Mr. Sargent's too modest to mention himself, but I was happy to be invited last week to the courthouse for the installation of his brother Dennis as first justice of the Clinton District Court. It's a terrific event and a great day for Clinton. It's really fantastic to have a true Clintonian back on the bench there, and I couldn't be happier for Judge Sargent, Mr. Sargent, and the entire Sargent family.
Thank you. Selectman Kerrigan, I just want to say thank you on behalf of my brother Dennis and my family. I want to thank you for attending that day, and I want to say thank you for the nice words.
I'm glad you don't share his gift for the gab. Let's just say that we'd have to schedule a lot longer meetings. It was his day.
Well, we certainly like to congratulate him.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to second the sentiments expressed. I wasn't able to attend the swearing-in ceremony, but I know that justice tempered by compassion will be offered at the Clinton Courthouse with Judge Sargent presiding. And as Sean said, it's nice to continue that tradition of justices serving in Clinton, like Morris Gould and Judge Constantino, and Tom Fallon, all Clintonians like Dennis, and I think it's great for the town to have Dennis there as the judge presiding in Clinton.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments? There being none and no more committee reports, that concludes the agenda for the evening, and we'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. There any discussion? There being none. All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried.
Mr. Chairman, may I take this one?
There you go.
I'll bring it up.